Good morning and happy Monday, folks. Welcome to After Hours. Just wanted to say thanks to people that have been commenting on the podcast and on the Instagram as well. But I love it when people comment on on their podcast platform that they're listening to. It really does go far. Do you know what I mean? People are commenting, and people see that, and then it looks like it makes it the one that they want to go and listen to. So it really does help. So thank you to those that have commented and put little mentions on so far. Thank you to people that have been sharing the podcast. It's just amazing that people are kind of taking it up on themselves to do that. So thank you very much. Today we've got Luke Jones. Luke's from Bristol, and when you listen to the podcast, I didn't even ask him to say we like cider in the West Country, because that was just his accent. Sorry, Luke, I'm not taking the piss, but it was I couldn't have even asked for a better comment there than that, and I think you did put it on, not put the accent on, but obviously saying that you like the cider in the West Country, because that's the kind of stereotypical thing that people say when they put on the West Country accent. So that was hilarious. Luke lives on the Isle of Man now. We haven't met in person yet. Hopefully by the time this comes out we will have. As you can see as you can hear in the episode, we were meant to do this face to face, but because of TT, it just it wasn't kind of feasible. Everywhere was just rammed at TT times. So yeah, we did it over Zoom, and it was a great conversation. Loved getting to know Luke, and it was just really Luke's about similar age to me, a little bit younger, but he grew up in the Bristol scene, with like lots of rave scene, drinking, drugs. I loved the Bristol scene. That was kind of my era when Massive Attack, Portishead, Tricky, and even Ronnie Size were all around that time. Banksy came out of that whole kind of scene as well. So very culturally and creatively massive at that time. But obviously with all that kind of scene, you get the aspect of alcohol and drugs with that. So it does have its fallout, it does have its kind of repercussions on a lot of people that were in that kind of scene and listening to that kind of music and going to those raves and events and things. But Luke kind of decided to go kind of backpacking, late 90s, early noughties, just kind of to go and see a bit of the world. And he found that with the whole kind of party scene in that kind of era, that was, I'm not going to say it was the beginning of the backpacking era, but it was when it kind of came to kind of the media's attention, that people were going out and backpacking on MTV and all of these kind of T4 and just all the kind of TV. It was showing people going and living the high life. What was the film? The beach. That kind of really brought it to light that people were just going off to like Southeast Asia, Australia, all these places, and going to like full moon parties, just drinking and drugging like heavily. So that whole backpacking scene is, I never quite did it myself, but I know a lot of people that did, and it sounded like a lot of fun at the time. But I suppose with Luke, his anxiety kind of really kind of took hold when he got back from that. I think it started out there, but really hit him when he got back. And he talks about a time when he was in India, and him and his partner were just kind of in a dry kind of part of India, but really struggling to find beer, and they eventually managed to get someone to kind of smuggle it out of a place for them. And we're talking like one or two beers, maybe three, and I suppose that's when a kind of red flag started showing up for him there. So I would just listen for the similarities in this story and not the differences. So yeah, here comes Luke. Thanks, guys. See you at the end. Luke, welcome to After Hours, mate. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for asking.
Good. Yeah, good to see you. So tell listeners where you are.
I am in the Isle of Man.
Hey, snapped, mate. I'm on the Isle of Man as well. And it's, you know what? We should be doing this in person. And for the listeners, we were going to, but TT is on at the moment. And to try and find, well, the place that we'd originally planned to do it either on the beach or at a place called Black Dog Oven, which is an amazing pizza place in Peel. We were going to do it there, but it's everywhere's just rammed at the moment, isn't it? So, yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
we're
the
back to
TT's on at the
Zoom.
moment, so it's absolute chaos on the island at the
it,
moment.
it is absolute madness. I think what they say that the population almost doubles when
It does. It
TT
doubles.
Fortnite's on.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, an invasion of over 80 mad
yeah.
bike fans.
Exactly, exactly. No, I love. I'm not a big bike fan, but I love the buzz of the island. You know, the roads are absolutely a bit precarious, but yeah, I do enjoy the buzz around the island. It's madness, is to say to put it lightly. So, yeah, so yeah, so just tell us about your kind of childhood, where you grew up, and when you had your first drink. Look.
Hey, so I grew up in a small little town on a large estate in just outside Bristol in the southwest of England. And my first drink, I would say, was about 12 or 13, probably.
Okay.
Coming from the West Country, there's lots of cider.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we like our cider in the West Country. So yeah, it was a bottle of white rough cider. I think it was called Mega White. It was
Oh.
like very similar to Diamond White, you know. And I the first memories I've got of drinking are just rolling around in a field out the
Mm,
front of. We used to live in some old miners' cottages,
mhm,
Parkfield Rank it was called. I just remember being outside there with a group of friends, swigging this rough white cider, and it gave me confidence, you know. And
mhm.
I just remember I just wanted to fit in with that group of friends, you know. And yeah, it was a way of everyone was doing it, you know.
Mhm.
And I I know you've said a lot before in your other pods about the 90s does have a lot to answer for.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's just the way it was back then, wasn't it? You know, growing up in the 90s,
It's funny
that's the
when
way
you
it was.
when you said there, because I was thinking rough cider. That's not really a scrumpy, is it? But when you said it's very similar to Diamond White. Now, Diamond White was I had my first drink was with my brother. My parents were away, and he was looking after me. He's a couple of years older than me, and he'd got some vodka. I snuck some vodka from their kind of drinks cabinet, and I think I had a little vodka and orange, like a house measure one. But that would so my first drink proper that would have been. But then when I went out with my mates, maybe about I don't know a couple of months later, we all got like 4 bottles of Diamond White and or maybe a 6 pack. But I didn't finish them. I was leathered before I finished the kind of 6 pack or 4 pack, whatever it was. But yeah, like you, gave me confidence. We were out. We felt like we could take on the world. And at 14, when you're just kind of starting to experiment and kind of becoming like almost like not an adult, but you start thinking about being an adult and all that kind of stuff. It's to get that kind of confidence and excitement and just doing it with your mates and feeling part of something. So yeah, I can I know why people do it. But how did that kind of develop for you?
Yeah, so obviously I've mentioned growing up in the 90s, you know, there
Mm,
was a big rave and dance scene, obviously, and in Bristol especially we used to go to a lot of free parties, and that
mm,
really, really did set the foundation of, you know, obviously what was to come.
mm.
Uh
Well, you
I
you you'd have been
remember,
there. Sorry, you'd have been there like and around the time like Massive Attack, Portishead,
yeah,
all of that kind of
yeah.
stuff. I mean, Bristol. I absolutely love Bristol. I've been many times, and I just
Mm.
love the whole scene that was coming out of there at that time. It was the time about Banksy. You probably bumped into Banksy at the time.
Oh
I think
yeah.
I think they're a wee bit older than us, but not too much. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole yeah. So what an amazing place to grow up, and obviously you're part of that. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it's a big student place as well, obviously. You know, there's a
yeah.
what, two or three unis there, so yeah, lots of nightclubs, lots of partying, lots of raving, and you know, very, very good times, you know. Obviously, I think alcohol and drugs, they can serve a purpose when you're younger, but
Hmm.
obviously as you get older and you start, self-medicating and drinking on your own and stuff, obviously, you know, it it can take a turn for the worst, obviously. But for
Hmm.
me, it really kicked off when I started backpacking. I backpacked around Australia and
Hmm.
Southeast Asia, and that's when it really took off.
And what age
Again,
were you at this point? Was that kind of a gap year or?
no, so this was I went to college from school for a couple of years,
Hmm.
and then I said, right, I'm just going to go to Australia because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I
Sure.
wanted to be a firefighter or something like along those lines. And I thought, right, I'm going to go to Australia. I've always been really, really interested, adventurous, always
Hmm.
been curious about the world. And I thought, why not? I'm going to go backpacking. So I went backpacking on my own and I had the time of my life. But obviously,
Yeah.
with that, a lot, again, a lot of drink and a lot of drugs and I had some really really good times.
Yeah.
But from that first trip around Australia and Southeast Asia, I just remember coming back, and I just remember being in went to the cinema with a group of friends, and I had my first panic attack. I
Mm.
suddenly started really suffering with anxiety,
Hmm.
and and I just remember I thought I was having a heart attack. It was really bad, and I just remember using alcohol more and more to cope with that then as well,
Yeah.
uh, which now having, gone sober and educated myself on it, of course, it's the worst thing you can possibly do because
Yeah.
you're in that constant, anxiety loop, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I'd been away backpacking for over a year, living the dream, and I come back and I was living back at home with my parents, sharing a bunk bed with my then brother, and I
Hmm.
was just using alcohol to cope.
Yeah.
And yeah, 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 really suffered really bad with anxiety.
Do you think that, going away, backpacking to Australia and these places, that's a massive thing to do on your own, to do solo. Like, I've got
Mm,
mates that wouldn't even go down the pub unless they knew they were meeting someone down there, because it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine being in there on my own. So that's a huge thing for you to do. Like, so
mm.
do you think that you were using drinking drugs whilst abroad, backpacking, to kind of give you more confidence as well? Or, was it just the whole party scene as well? I mean, it sounds like you were kind of using it to get the confidence, because obviously it's a social aspect when you're going backpacking. You're not just going on a solo adventure and not really speaking to people. You're meeting people, you're hanging out, and obviously partying as well. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, Obviously, meeting lots of new people.
Hmm.
Again, society normalizes it, doesn't it? Let's go
Yeah.
to the pub, let's have a drink,
Yeah.
and straight away again, you're swigging those beers, you're drinking the wine. We used to drink lots of goon juice, I remember, in Australia. That's
Goon
the
juice.
big box goon juice we used to call it. Yeah, so that's the big boxes of wine, with the
Right.
little nozzle on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The students out there used to drink it, and I just remember being in the back of the. I bought a camper van in Sydney and drove all the way around Australia, and I just had I just had this goon juice in the back of the van, and of course, at the time, you think it's normal, don't you? But I
Yeah.
look back on it now, and I think, bloody hell, Luke, what the hell were you thinking? But yeah,
Yeah.
society just normalizes it, doesn't it?
Of course it
And
does. And
it's only when you,
Australia's a massive drinking culture. I mean, the
oh
UK
God, it is,
is,
yeah.
but Australia, like I remember, what is it, all the outback pubs down in London and places like that. It's all the Aussies over, and they're doing their kind of student traveling, but they're all massive drinking head cases. Like, I've got a lot of Australian mates that I met in London, and yeah, but it was just that whole culture. They just were like, they work hard, they play hard. So I can imagine. I've never been to Australia, but I can imagine Australia itself is a bit of a big drinking culture as well.
Definitely, yeah. So you go from the UK and you think, we're big drinkers, and you go over
Yeah,
there and wow, yeah, they can drink as well.
yeah,
And it's very hot in Australia, not so much in the south around Melbourne, but pretty much everywhere else. When you get out of the state of Victoria, it's very hot.
yeah,
And it's any excuse, isn't it? You know what it's like. And when you've got the barbecue out, then you have a drink. And
Yeah.
yeah, and the Aussies absolutely love it. But when I come back from my first trip,
Yeah.
I met my now wife, and
Okay.
we yeah, and I instantly fell in love, and we both shared that that same zest for life.
Hmm.
I just knew that she was the one, but she was quite similar to me in she was adventurous. She wanted to see the world as well. She wanted to travel, but
Hmm.
of course she liked to drink as well.
Mm.
And we I remember we went to South America
Hmm.
for 6 months, and again, lots of drinking, and South America, drugs as well. And then we came back, and then we went away again, and we went to our first stop then was India. And of course, my drinking was quite, it was starting to escalate at this
Hmm.
point. And with Kate, my wife as well, yeah, I had a little drinking buddy as well. And one of
Yeah.
the things that stands out about that trip to me was when we first got to India. I remember we were in Delhi, and we couldn't get a drink
Mm.
because their
The culture's
culture.
different. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And Jimmy, I remember we were literally going round to all these places asking, can we get a beer? We were going into a restaurant and asking, have you got any alcohol or what? Like,
Yeah.
and they were sort of looking at me like, oh, yeah, and they were taking us to different restaurants. And I remember we found this place and this little back alley
Uh-huh.
because it's obviously frowned upon, and they smuggled out this beer to us at the table, and we
Yeah.
had to cover it in plastic in paper bags,
Wow.
and looking at the time I remember thinking, why don't these guys like a drink? What is wrong with them? But
Yeah.
but of course, it was me who had the problem, and
Yeah. And it's
that was definitely a warning sign for me.
and how old were you at that point, do you think? I mean, mid
Uh,
20s or still
no,
early
I
20s?
would have still been early 20s, mate. Yeah,
Yeah.
so this would have been 2003, 2004. So
And it's
I would have been early 20s then, mate. Yeah.
but it's interesting that, and a lot of people that maybe listen to this, because I know that there's, people that don't have a drinking problem listening, and they're like, well, if you go into a restaurant and you say, oh, we don't have any beer, you'd be like, oh, well, I'll just have, a soft drink or an iced tea or whatever. But you guys actually went on a mission to
Uh,
try and find beers, and then eventually it's almost like you're buying like illicit drugs at that point, but all you were
yeah,
doing is buying a couple of beers. But you
yeah,
obviously, I suppose, I'm not saying you were dependent on it at that point, but as you say, it was a red flag. But it's like once you've got it in your head that there's a place, this place doesn't sell beer, I need to find it. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole the chase is on kind of thing as well. And I think that yeah, as you say, it's a bit of a red flag, a bit of a warning sign in that. And it's interesting. I mean, I know there's
yeah.
different cultures around
It
the world
was.
that don't have drinking, but I think what I'm just trying to think what beers that you do get at the Indian restaurant. Is it Tiger beer or something like that?
No,
Um,
Tiger Bears.
is
I
that
know,
is
I
that
know quite a
Thai?
lot of these actually, but Ti Tiger Bear, I think,
Yeah,
is from Malaysia. I
right.
think,
Because I know
and
we went for a Thai
or
the other night.
Vietnam, but
Sorry, go on.
yeah. Yeah, it's either from Vietnam or Malaysia, Tiger beer, because
Yeah.
I traveled through Vietnam and Malaysia, and I used to drink a lot of Tiger beer there. But in India, you drink Cobra and Kingfisher lagers.
Cobra and Kingfisher, that's it. Zinger is from Thailand, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, so I
Zinger
mean
is
it's
Thailand,
it's
mate. Yeah.
it's just obviously where you were, that area, whatever that was, because it's not a dry country, it's not like completely dry, but it was just
No, no.
interesting.
So I actually said to my wife, because I remember
Hmm.
this is oh God, I think about it now, it's madness. But I remember saying, when we get to Goa in the south, it'd be
Yeah.
different, and it
Yeah.
was. So when we got to Kerala, which is a state where Goa is in the south, it was different. A lot
Hmm.
more, a lot more tourists on the beach. It was a lot more normalized to drink. And
Yeah.
then from there, we went to Thailand, and of course, Thailand's big, big, big party,
Yeah.
and again lots of drinks. So it was like, yeah, oh
Yeah.
sweet, back
But
back
it's
drinking again. Yeah.
it's interesting that because I was going to say to you, Goa's always, well, was all, I mean, it's still a place I'd want to go, but I think back in the day it was somewhere that I dreamed of going because it's got that hippie culture, that party culture, and all that. But it's
Mm.
interesting because, I'm guessing India as a whole, they're not really big drinkers over there, but you go to these places like Goa, which are purely there for. the Western tourists, you know. And it's funny that a whole like geographical location, a whole village or town or whatever it is, city can you know kind of almost change its ethos to accommodate us Western and boozers coming over. You know, I don't think Thailand was a big drinking culture until you know they had this Western invasion of backpackers and tourists. It's but then it's
Definitely,
just like
100%.
full moon parties, you know, like kind of buckets of booze and all of that kind of stuff. I went to Thailand 2010 and it was just madness, absolute madness. You know, obviously I
It's
was a big
carnage.
drinker then, so I loved it, but I was just like, this is a crazy, crazy place. And it's
Yeah,
obviously
yeah, it
not
is.
that's not their culture, so it's not like that, you know, that's their heritage. It's just that us Westerners come over and invade with our booze antics. So yeah, so
Definitely, yeah.
how did your 20s kind of develop then? Obviously you've
Yeah,
met your
so
wife and you know.
yeah, so I met my wife, and then we did a few trips traveling, and
Mhm.
then I come back, and we bought a place together. And I remember at that time I was drinking every day then, and
Mhm.
I'd always have at least, four cans of Carling Lager. I always remember,
Mhm.
and then we sort of shifted then to the premium lagers. I remember thinking I don't want to drink Foster's or Carling or anything weaker. We've got to
Yeah.
have Heineken. You've worked hard all week.
Yeah.
You sort of justify it in that way, don't you? I want to have I can afford to have the better lagers now, so I
Yeah. Of
start drinking that. And it's just a constant excuse, isn't it? Especially in this
course it is.
society, it's someone's birthday, it's a barbecue, there's always an event.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, of course, then we had our two children, and my wife wasn't working, so I was working more. I was putting more hours in, so of course, with
Hmm.
that comes, more drinking,
Hmm.
and
And what is your
when I
job?
come back.
Sorry, Luke. What is your
Um,
job? What is
yeah,
your
yeah.
job then?
So I'm a plumber by trade.
Okay.
So yeah, so my dad and granddad were both plumbers. So I sort of
Yeah.
I fell into that when I got back from traveling.
Yeah.
And with construction, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's that whole work hard, play hard, beers on the way home, and
Lad
that whole
mentality, and you're making good
yeah,
money. Being a plumber, it's a great job. I've
exactly,
got a mate who's in
exactly.
recovery as well. He's a plumber, and yeah, it's a great job working for yourself. But yeah, you know, I mean, it's a big boozy culture, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah, yeah, exactly. And a couple of examples of when I was drinking back in Bristol in that sort of culture. I remember one example that flags up was we went to bonfire night once, and my brother-in-law we always used to take cans out with us.
Hmm.
I always had a couple of cans in my coat. Especially in the winter, I could always fill up the coat with a couple of cans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, now obviously now I'm sober, and I've gone through my sobriety uh, journey. I look back on all these times and I think, God, all these flags, were coming up. And yeah, and he said to me, he said, Luke, are you drinking? And I was like, yeah. And he said, bloody hell, it's any excuse, isn't it?
Mm.
And I would be like, and I would just laugh at him and not think anything of it. And we'd go any event, even if it was going to the circus with the kids, we'd
Hmm.
always check and make sure there was a bar there, or things would always revolve around the pub.
Yeah.
Was there a pub that we could go in on the way home? If we were going on a walk, was there a
Mm.
pub? You know, you know, all these little things, and then obviously when COVID hit, uh, oh my God, I just remember thinking, right, what are we gonna do? Let's get a hot tub. And
Hmm.
and we got a hot tub, and then I just remember starting to drink Captain Morgan's and rum. Oh, Jimmy, God, I used to sit in that hot tub drinking rum after rum, and I just remember um I used to have a pint glass, right?
Yeah.
And I used to be, and it started with a little shot of rum, and as the months were going on, it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I thought nothing of it at the time. But the amount of times we used to sit in that hot tub drinking, and I'd be getting out, and I'd be stumbling, and I'd be, and yeah, that's when things, really, really got started getting out of hand, I think.
And so, sorry, what's your wife's name again? Did you mention it earlier?
Kate,
Kate.
Kate.
So Yeah, so and was Kate kind of obviously I imagine she wasn't drinking through the pregnancies, but then after that, was she still kind of quite a big drinker, like your drinking
Yes.
buddy alongside that? And that's so you're saying that all these different events you're looking for the pub or the going for a meal. Like I was the same when I would go out with my ex-partner and the kids, we'd go out and if we were out somewhere for the day, I would need to find a pub for lunch so that I could at least have 1 or 2 pints. If she was driving, then it would be 2 pints. We'd never go into a cafe for lunch because for me, it'd be like, well, I'm not going to get a drink here, am I? So that kind of it builds and
Exactly.
builds and builds. And so when you've got the hot tub and it's COVID, are you working? Are you were plumbers considered like emergency, like first line
Yeah,
workers?
I was actually one of the lucky ones in our
Hmm.
firm that kept me in work. It was bitty,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, I managed to keep on working. But of course, when you come home on an evening, you couldn't go out anywhere, could you? You still had nothing to do on an
yeah.
evening. So I was still drinking a hell of a lot. Yeah, I just remember when I think back to COVID, I just think of Captain Morgan's in a hot
Yeah.
tub. I really do,
And
you
it's
know.
almost like, the way you said that, like, what are we going to do? It's COVID. Let's get a hot tub. It's almost like you got that hot tub as an excuse to be drinking, like glamorously
Yeah,
in the hot tub.
yeah,
Because, like, okay, you could sit in the living room and drink Captain Morgan's and watch Netflix, but we've got hot tub. So what we're doing is very classy. It's very culturally aware of life and zeitgeist, but it's just an excuse to drink, isn't it? Because we associate all these glamorous things with alcohol. Oh my god, how would I look with a glass in the hand sitting in this hot tub? Or do you know what I mean? It's this weird
yeah,
mentality that we
yeah.
have. And so
Yeah, yeah. And I remember taking pictures as well, the selfies, with the drink in the hot tub and sending it to everyone. So yeah, 100% mate. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, what
and
you
that
just said.
summer, that
Yeah.
summer, I mean, I'm hoping that this summer is going to be a repeat of it because we have had a few nice-ish summers, but not like that summer. 2020 was just because everyone was at home, they were either furloughed or not working as much or working at home, working from home, and I was in the depths of the end of my kind of alcoholism for want of a better word. So that summer was just a bit of a blur and a mess. But August was when I got sober that year. But it was this amazing summer where everyone didn't really know what was going on. So we all kind of, I say all, people were drinking. They were drinking heavier. I know people that weren't big drinkers before or didn't have a problem before, but COVID kind of tipped them over the edge. And it sounds like that kind of happened with you. So how far
Definitely.
into that did it get? What was your kind of darkest point at that point?
Um, I, I, I have to say, I never really hit a complete and utter rock bottom.
Hmm.
I'd always consider myself a sort of grey area drinker,
Yeah, and
but
sorry,
I
darkest
would,
darkest moment is probably, I need to probably reframe that question because I know that a lot of people, especially that I've had in the podcast, they didn't get to as dark a point as I did, but obviously you were feeling something needs to give here, so yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, 100%. I remember I started to hide cans.
Mhm.
I'd always
And
my
even
habits and my
sorry to
patterns and my
butt in, but you were
routines.
you were hiding from
Yeah,
Kate as well. So she's a drinker, but you're actually
exactly.
hiding from. Oh, see, that's yeah, yeah. Okay, okay,
Yeah, yeah, that's bad, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Kate's never been as bad as I was, and to be honest, I was always the instigator, but we sort of encouraged each other. I remember we'd always say, right, on a Sunday night, you get the Sunday scaries, don't you? You're dreading
Ah,
to go back into work, you're drinking on a Sunday, and you're thinking, oh, bloody hell, oh God, I'm gonna have to. And then obviously Monday, Tuesday, and then you're thinking about getting another drink, oh, no, I'm definitely not going to drink to the weekend, I'm going to hold out.
mhm.
And then Kate would text me midweek, oh, the sun's out, isn't it? Oh, oh, haven't we got to go around and see so and so? Oh, should I get a bottle of wine on the way in from work? And you're just like, and then yeah, before you know it, you're drinking again midweek or whatever.
Yeah,
And for a couple of years, I tried to moderate Jimmy, and it just just did not work. It
yeah.
it really really didn't. And I just remember it was around about 40. I just
Hmm.
remember waking up one morning, like a few years ago, and thinking, "Is this it?" Just another hungover morning, thinking,
Hmm.
Is this what life's all about?" You
Yeah.
know. And I remember around that sort of time, I said, "Right, I'm going to start making some changes." Like I said, I tried to moderate, and it was just so exhausting trying to moderate because you've always got that option, haven't you? And you're
Yeah.
always in that constant battle with yourself, and it's exhausting, like I said. So we went to Twickenham, and Twickenham was always a big day out on the piss.
Hmm.
And I said to Kate, right, I'm going to drive, and and we went with the kids,
Hmm.
and she was like, "What? You're going to drive?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm going to drive. I'm going to do it."
Hmm.
And we I drove, and I didn't drink. I didn't even have one drink, and I remember the whole game, Jimmy. It was amazing, and
Yeah.
I remember the score. I remembered every kick, every try, and that was a massive eye opener. And that was evidence that I could actually go out
Yeah.
and like to an event and enjoy it without having a drink.
Enjoy it
And so
more.
that was a massive eye opener. Exactly. Just because I remembered everything and I was actually there in the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, with alcohol, you know, you numb everything out. Everything's fuzzy. You
Yeah.
think you're having a great time, but yeah, when when you're like us and you've been on the other side of the fence, you see everything completely different.
Yeah.
And a similar thing happened with the darts as well. I used to I'm a massive fan of the PDC darts,
Hmm.
and I remember seeing my idol Phil Taylor play in Exeter, down the road from Bristol, and I can't even remember him playing.
Mm.
And it's so sad. And I was absolutely hammered. And then recently we went to on holiday in the Lake District, and we went to Blackpool to watch the darts. And
Hmm.
again, we took the kids, and I wanted to set a good example. I wanted to be a good role model, and I didn't drink, and I drove, and I had a brilliant night. It was absolutely brilliant. Actually, a drunken brawl broke out in front of us, and we the security jumped in, and they actually moved us to the VIP section, and we actually got really really close, like really really close to the darts and the
Uh,
players, and it was a brilliant night, and all these little things were happening,
yeah.
and it was evidence that was building that there was another life after drinking.
Yeah. It's all these little lights switching on, isn't it? And it's like that kind of wakening up and going ping, 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 and it's like, oh wow, this is I can do this, and it's so commendable of you to just try these things and then see the result, because it's so easy to just to have an idea to go, oh, I'll drive tonight, but then you think, ah. I'll do it next week or I'll do it the next event or do you know what I mean? And that just becomes and it must have been hard because I know you're saying that Kate's not, as big a drinker as you were, but like what you were saying, when it's like you're trying to lay off it through the week, and I'm not blaming Kate at all, but with my ex, like she possibly knew I had a bit of an issue, but she didn't want to admit that, and I hate the word alcoholic, but she didn't want to admit that I had a problem because if she admitted that, then it meant that there would be no booze in the house. And she liked to drink, but not like to crazy lengths like me. So it was like we would try that moderation thing. But then she would phone like or text midweek and say, "Oh, it's a lovely night. Should we get a bottle of wine?" And it was like ka-ching for me. It was like, right, yeah, of course I'm going to say yes because she's made it okay for me to have a drink. Like if we're saying, oh, we're going to cut
Yeah,
down, we're doing that, but she's given the nod and it's okay for me to have a drink. And then, yeah, I would go hell for leather, and that's where
yeah.
I needed to kind of not have anyone say, yeah, have a drink. And that's the thing. We have to do it for ourselves. So you trying these little moments, especially when, you're driving. So I'm sure Kate's having a few beers or wines at the
Yeah,
event.
she was. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so commendable. And so obviously you're trying those little moments, but then maybe having drinks other times. So when was it you actually made that choice and go, right, this is it. I'm going to do this for good.
Yeah, so I'd say there was two standout moments.
Hmm.
There was there was this day I'll never forget it, and um I always used to say my son, he's 14 now, but I remember as a couple of years ago, I'd always be telling him, "Oh, can you grab me a beer?" You know, and I'd always joke with him. I'd say, "Oh, it's great having kids because they can grab you a beer. You haven't even got to get up out of the couch, you know."
Yeah, yeah.
And it's such a bad thing to say. I think
It's
about it
so
now. I
bad,
think,
but we
wow,
see it on
mate, it's
reels.
terrible. It's
We see it
terrible,
on
mate.
reels, and it's like, oh, and it's like they teach them how to open the bottle, and it's like, but we laugh about it, and then when you're seeing it from our side of the fence, you're like, how bad parenting is that? You're
Yeah,
just normalizing the alcohol, the
yeah.
drug, the poison. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember in the hot tub as well. Me and Kate were in the hot tub, and of course we'd ring the kids, and they go and get us drinks. You know, so we wouldn't have to get the hot tub. Really, really bad, Jimmy. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
No,
But
no, it's good.
yeah, I remember going to the fridge one day and opening the door, grabbing a can of lager off the top shelf, and my son looked at me and he said, "Dad, are you an alcoholic?" And I was like, shit, it really, it was just like everything stopped.
And how
And
old was he at this
for
point?
that was what, 2 years ago. So he
Yeah.
would have been about 12. So
12.
so that's the sort of age, isn't it? They're sort of really grown up then. They're sort of seeing
Yeah.
things differently. They're
But it's
sort of finding their
interesting.
feet, if you like.
It's interesting to, for a 12-year-old, like what actual understanding of the word alcoholic do they have? Because I guess even before I got sober, that my impression, thought of an alcoholic was someone, passed out on a park bench with a bottle in a brown paper bag, and that's not what alcoholics are. Obviously, they're people that are dependent on alcohol, but they're all different types of people. There's so many around that we don't see because we're hiding it, or and it doesn't discriminate. So for a 12-year-old, it's interesting to know what his thought would be. But obviously, he sees you drinking a lot. So what do you think had kind of brought him to that kind of conclusion, or ask consideration?
May, Maybe it was, asking for the beers. Maybe it was, the constant drinking in the hot tub.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, and I've spoke about other coaches with this since, and you feel safe in your comfort zone in your home, don't you?
yeah, yeah,
So when somebody that close to you points something out, you're just like, wow, this is, I could see how he saw everything, through his lens, if you like.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
He was, like you said, um, obviously he could see the drinking was getting out of hand.
yeah,
So that was a massive revelation. That was around the same sort of time that I was waking up thinking, is this it? You know, I'm at midlife now. Am I going to be doing this for another 40 years? Do I really want to be doing this? I'm
yeah,
feeling like shit the way I am for another 40 years. I got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired.
yeah.
It's a great saying, but it's so true.
It's so
And
true,
then
so true.
it's so true, Jimmy. And then the other thing was definitely last year. So last year, my father-in-law passed away,
Ah,
and he was such a fit and healthy man. He was 70,
hmm,
but nowadays that's not that old,
yeah.
really,
It's
is it?
young. It's young.
And it is, and he was so fit and healthy, and he got cancer, and within a year he was gone,
Wow.
and he'd never been like to the doctors, to a hospital or anything. And my last conversation with him, he was just saying to me, "Luke, life is short.
Hmm.
Luke, life is short," and he kept repeating it, and I'll never forget it, Jimmy. And I said to Kate, I said, "I'm done with living like this." That was definitely the final push for me to quit.
Yeah,
So it was a mixture of things. I think with alcohol, it's never clear cut. It's such a slow burner,
yeah,
and I love the analogy. Death by a thousand cuts. And
yeah,
when people say to me, "Why have you quit?" I was like, "Bloody hell! How long have you got?" There's so many reasons, and
yeah.
it's a build up of years and years and years, isn't it? So yeah, that was the final turning point for me.
And like what you just said there, like people say, "Oh, why have you given up? Why have you quit?" And you almost want to turn around and go, "Why do you drink?" So
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that point,
exactly.
when you were kind of sober curious and thinking, right, I'm kind of getting towards the end of my tether with this, I'm done. Did you know quite how dangerous alcohol is at that point, or is that something you've kind
No.
of researched and learned?
exactly.
Yeah,
So through my journey through personal and self-development,
yeah.
I've yeah, I say to my clients and people I help that you become sober curious,
Hmm.
and then you start to educate yourself on sobriety, on alcohol, and
Hmm.
you start listening to podcasts, start listening to audiobooks, and
Yeah.
then it's like, because people say to me now, I've just had my brother over for the
Mhm.
motorbike TT we were talking about earlier, and of course, he's there drinking, and he's saying to me, "Are you seriously never going to drink again?"
Mm.
And I looked at him and I said, "If you knew what I knew, then then
Yeah.
no." But people don't know it, do they, Jimmy? They
You,
really don't.
they don't. And like as I say, I was down at my mate's 50th birthday celebrations at the weekend. And don't get me wrong, like Rob and I back in the day, we were absolute, party heads, rec heads, all the rest of it. He has calmed down. Obviously, I have. But he still likes a drink, and it was a bit of a boozy weekend for him because he's turning 50, and I was staying at his, so I was kind of, there in amongst it, and I don't. You know, I hear a lot of people in different podcasts and say, I don't want to preach. You know what? I don't mind it if people think I'm preaching because I don't think I was boring them, but I would, I wasn't trying to scare them, but I was just saying people don't know how bad, because they brought it up. They're like, oh, is this okay that we're drinking in front of you? And I was like, yeah, because none of you are absolutely leathered. You're not, I can have conversations with you. If you
Mm,
weren't able to speak to me, then it'd be a different story, but they were
yeah,
all right. But then, they've asked me about alcohol and alcoholism. So I would then, pipe up and say just how bad it is, And yeah, I might be a bit of a party pooper, but when people don't know, because I didn't know, and I was drinking to absolute oblivion, not realizing, quite how bad it is for you. And I gave them all the stats and figures. I don't have them in front of me now, but I'll put them on the show notes, because they were amazed at, like, when I started listing, and I'm going to pull these out there. Say for instance, all the illicit illegal drugs put together, it was like, I think it was like 20,000 people had died from that, and then it goes up to alcohol, and it was something like, uh, I think it was 643,000. Do you know what I mean? It was just a
yeah,
massive ramp up compared to what drugs were. Obviously, smoking is much higher than that, but it's bad. Do you know what I mean? That this is just people dying from alcohol.
mm,
And a lot of
yeah,
people go, yeah, but I don't drink that much. And yeah, it's still a poison and it's still doing you damage. It's, the limits that the NHS tell us are still too high. If it
14
was,
units, isn't it?
yeah, something
Is it
ridiculous.
14 units? I mean, who drinks 14 units a week? Come on, really?
No, 14 units a night. Look, if you know what I mean. TT's
I
on at the
know.
moment, and I hear people talking about how they're sinking 20 pints in a night.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah, it's
island
insane.
makes an absolute fortune
Oh
through
yeah,
the booze and the petrol and the diesel
yeah,
that's been, churned out over here at the moment. But I,
yeah.
I had no idea the dangers. The fact that alcohol is a carcinogen. You know what I mean? That's
Carcinogen number one.
like
Yeah,
like tobacco
yeah,
has that all over the packets, but alcohol
mm,
doesn't. And I think, you know, preaching is probably a strong word, but I think people need to be aware of the facts. Let them drink if they want to drink, but tell them how bad it is first, before, and then they
exactly.
can make up their own educated decision. Because
I
people, when
know
you tell people how bad it is, they're like,
yeah,
"Oh shit, what? Hang on."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's tough. I know. Obviously, knowing what we know is so tough, and it's so hard. It's one of the hard. It's actually, I was talking about this with Kate the other night. It's
Hmm.
one of the hardest things for me in sobriety. It hasn't been not drinking. It's been keeping a lid on, not jumping up on my box and preaching to
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah.
because when you know, you can't unknow it, Jimmy, can you?
No.
And people, obviously, when people have, when you're out drinking with people as well, obviously they're
Hmm.
drinking, I'm on my AF lagers or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they start asking those questions, why are you drinking that crap, blah blah blah, and you start telling them, and of course you're never going to win that argument, are you? And
Not
then
when they're
they're like,
drinking.
oh, no, not when they're drinking now. And I always say that to them. I say, look, if you were sober, I could have that conversation with you, and then straight away, oh, you're being judgy, you're looking down on me, and this, that, and the other, and then it just gets nasty, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're never gonna win. But it's so tough. I was actually chatting to my granddad a
Yeah.
couple of weeks ago. And he's really old school, and he said to me, he said, well, he said, I think it's great what you're doing, Luke. Fair play to you. You're not drinking anymore, are you? He said,
Hmm.
I only have a glass of wine, every night because it's good for me. And I thought, oh God,
Mm.
but that's what society's told him, and that's what he believes. And it's
It
it's
used
it's
to be
tough,
good.
Jimmy, isn't it?
It used to be good. In fact, I think you could cure all illnesses with leeches. Do you know what I mean? So, but
Yeah.
times
Oh God.
change, times change, and I used to know that. What was it like? It was like, oh, a glass of wine is good for you. I think they even used to say a cigarette a day was good for you. But things
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
Medical science gets better and better, and we start realizing that just because something, well, let's be honest, alcohol makes an absolute shit ton of money for the government all around the
Yeah.
world, so
Exactly.
they're not ready to just go, let's pull the plug on that.
Yeah. It's going to take a long time.
it's a big conspiracy, and I feel like what you're saying, when you're on this side, it's almost like the veil of the matrix has been lifted. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanna shout and scream to people and say, do you know what? Like, whatever you think that alcohol is doing for you, you can do it much better without it. Like
Yeah.
I had a great time at the party at the weekend. We went to see Pete Tong at the
Oh,
Royal
brilliant.
Albert
Okay.
Hall in London doing all the Ibiza classics with the Royal
Mm.
Philharmonic Orchestra, and it was maybe, like going back maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would have struggled to go to that because it's a social event without alcohol. But you know what? It was one of the best nights I've had in a long time, and it was just a whole auditorium filled with old aging ravers. Do you know what I mean? Just getting up. And don't get me wrong, there was definitely lots of people taking little cheeky trips to the toilet to, fill their nose and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah. You're
it
aware of
was
that
still a
now.
great night, and I was dancing my ass off, and
Yeah.
it was just incredible. But you learn to
You're
get back into these things, because if we've started
exactly.
drinking at 14, 15, we don't know how to socialize without alcohol. So it's retraining our brains, it's
Yeah.
CBT. Yeah.
It is, yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, all of your adult life. I mean, people say to me about socializing, I've got really, really close friends, and I don't even know them sober,
Mm,
and
mm.
it's really, really close friends, and it's quite scary. Who are they? Who are they really when they're sober? Because
Yeah,
they've always got that drink in their hand,
yeah,
and yeah, when you break it down, it is scary.
it is, it is. And so when you made that choice and started, working towards getting sober, how did you find that? Was it, I'm not going to say was it easy, but was it kind of because you were so determined and, as I say, grey area drinker, what kind of tools and things did you put in place to kind of succeed?
I think, like I mentioned before, listening to podcasts on
Mm, mm.
sobriety, massive, massive help. I I I actually saw an ad on Facebook and got into the world of affiliate marketing, like the digital world, and
Yeah, yeah.
I started doing that as a side hustle, and that's where I which eventually led me to coaching, got
Mm-hmm.
into the world of coaching. So through that and through listening to podcasts, listening to brilliant audiobooks, I
Yeah.
I my mindset started changing, and this has been the building blocks in my sobriety journey. I think I started learning all about journaling,
Mm-hmm.
meditation, breath work, manifestation, gratitude, all these things, and I've always been fascinated with psychology and how the brain works anyway, and doing the inside work. And if you would have mentioned these sort of terms to me a few years ago, I would have just laughed at you and said, "What the hell are you? What have you been smoking?" And and during this time, I got a health watch,
Mm-hmm.
and I started recording my heart rate variability. And when I was drinking, Jimmy, it was off the chart. It was like I was ill.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was another part of the jigsaw. It was all, all these things were lining up, and I'm
Mm,
thinking, what the hell am I doing to myself? And
mm.
of course, the father-in-law dying and stuff, I'm thinking, we only get one vessel, we only get one body, and you're literally just, you're poisoning it. It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell are you doing? Just because society's normalized it and everyone does it, so all these, like you were saying before, all these light bulb moments were happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all this mindset shift was happening over a couple of years, really. And
Hmm.
then we decided to move to the Isle of Man. And, moving here, having that fresh start,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have ever have done it if I wouldn't have done all that mindset work and all that personal and self-development. No way.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And it's like what you say. I don't want to be. I think I used to idolize people like Keith Richards and all that, and it's like, he's this leathery old kind of like seems to live forever type guy. He's obviously been blessed with really good genes. We're not all blessed with really good genes, so we kind of have to not take the risks and look after ourselves. I'm getting married this year, and I want to live a long time with my wife, and the kids and that, and not be hunched over in my kind of late 50s, early 60s, and having to take a million different pills just because I abused myself when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? I'm hoping that I have stopped it in time, that I'm going to be, taking care of myself. But going forward, this is it. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to be, one of the healthiest and hopefully fittest kind of 60, 70, 80, maybe 90-year olds going. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not putting this booze and this poison in my body all the time. People need to realize that just because you're having a couple of glasses or a bottle a week, that it's not having any effect. It definitely is. And, I think that's really kind of the key here. It's, do you want to, people are so health conscious these days about, maybe plant-based eating and going to the gym, and everyone's like wants to look good and all that. And yet they're still pouring alcohol down their gullet every weekend or through the week. And it's,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
it's just it's
yeah,
just
yeah. And it
absolute
can be the
madness.
foundation. And it can be the foundation. I mean, when you go sober and you become so self-aware, all those
Hmm.
other things, you're going to level up in all those different aspects
Yeah.
of your life. I remember when I was drinking, it was all about, it was about drinking, partying, uh, working hard and playing hard, like I said before.
Hmm.
And I didn't really care. And when you're in that mentality, like, oh, I want to live fast and die young. But when you
Yeah.
go sober, it's the opposite. You can still learn, you can still have an amazing life, and you can have a long life. So when you
Yeah.
go sober, you're not only you're not only getting more time back because you're not hungover, you're making more of the time you have got and enjoying it,
Hmm.
and then you're going to live longer as well. So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
and time is our most precious asset. So we're getting time back twice, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we're remembering everything. Do you know what I mean? The weekends, the lost weekends that I've had that, I've no recollection of. It's absolute madness. And it's it's scary because I think people that know me and know my issue, they're like, oh, and nobody feels sorry for me. They're just like, I think a lot of people at the beginning were like, oh, it's a shame you can't have a drink. And I'm like, I'm not bothered. I don't even, now I don't want to have a drink. But the difference between like people thinking, well, I'm okay because I'm only drinking this amount. So I'm moderating. I'm never going to become an alcoholic or, alcohol use disorder person, but you're still poisoning yourself. And I hate to keep harping on about it, but that's the kind of point. It's like it doesn't matter if you don't ever become an alcoholic, you're still effectively putting a poison into your body that has been designated a carcinogen. So I need people to stop doing that. But I will get off my high horse here. But so
I love it. I love it.
did you? When you got sober, did you think I'm going to go straight into, not straight into being a sober coach, but how did that kind of develop with your kind of career? Is that what you do full time now, or are you still plumbing?
Yeah, so I'm still working as a plumber,
Hmm.
but I'm doing the coaching, the affiliate marketing and coaching on the side.
Nice, nice.
I Yeah, yeah. So I'm just slowly building that business now.
Yeah,
I used to be a mindset coach for affiliate marketers.
cool. Yeah,
Um, but yeah, so I did my accreditation as a life coach, and then I did my NLP Master Practitioner,
nice.
and that, yeah. So having that set of tools, that toolkit, and helping people understand how their minds work, how they
Yeah,
think, speak, and behave, and how you can reprogram those patterns that really
yeah,
create lasting change through NLP. Again, it's the whole reframing and reprogramming the mind. So when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's the same with alcohol. It's the same with everything, Jimmy.
No, and I love that. And so, what made you guys move to the Isle of Man? Because I don't know if you've heard this saying, but and I used to kind of thrive on this saying because I used to live here back in my late 20s, and there's a saying that goes around that the Isle of Man is 80,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock. And I used to think that was hilarious, and that's a phrase that they use. They bring it. They used to have people with T-shirts on around TT, and I used to think it was so funny. I don't. Maybe I'm not walking in the right circles anymore, or I'm not walking in the wrong circles. I don't hear it as much, but it definitely used to be this phrase that they used to use. So you've obviously come to the right place to sober coach when there's 80,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock. I'm not saying that the island's full of alcoholics. It's just as bad as anywhere else. But yeah. So what actually brought you guys over here?
So I'm a massive motorbike fan.
Sure.
We first came over in 2013 when my I remember my boy was a couple of years, 3 years old he would have been, and my
Mm-hmm.
girl would have been one, and just fell in love with the place.
Mm-hmm.
We come over, yeah. So we've been over for 3 TTs before, and the last time we come over, a couple of was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I just said to my wife, I said, why don't we move here?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful place, fresh air. We love walks in nature. You're never 20 minutes, more than 20 minutes from a beach.
Yeah.
And I just got fed up with the rat race, in Bristol, the traffic,
Yeah.
and yeah, just wanted a fresh start. And it's a great place to bring up children. It's
Oh,
one of the safest places in the UK.
it really is. It really is. I love it. It's where I got sober and stayed sober. So I just have this kind of almost it's got like this magical hold over me. Obviously we believe in fairies over here as well. So, you know, I
Yeah,
I just absolutely adore the place. And as I say, it got me sober and it gave me my life back. And my life is just unfathomably better than what it used to be. And yeah, I'm sure I might have got sober elsewhere, but it wasn't like the stars weren't aligned and they were for me here. And I just absolutely love it. So what's your actual sober date then? How many days, years, months sober are you, Luke?
so I went sober this year.
Mm-hmm.
So in January. So coming up to what is it, 6 months now, and we're in June.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, but I've been in that battle for a couple of years, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Um I've been trying to moderate for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since I was 40, roughly.
Yeah.
So I'd cut down so much, and obviously with all the mindset work, with all the personal development work, with the coaching. Uh, in the end, it was nothing like it was leading up to my 40th birthday. But yeah, and with I remember when I decided to be a sober coach, I spoke to a lot of different coaches in the industry, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
do you think I need to be sober for years
Mm-hmm.
before
Mm-hmm.
I become a sober coach? And they said, Luke, we don't think so. Purely
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people who are in their early sobriety will be able to relate to you.
Yeah.
Uh, and and I think as well, a lot of people are, they look at these unicorns, if you like, people who are so far into their sobriety journey and think, wow, they get overwhelmed almost. So
Yeah.
I think being only within my first year has also got some pluses as a sober coach as well.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think you're totally right. I think some people have an issue with, you see it on Instagram and it's like, oh, I've been sober a month and I'm a sober coach. And it's like that is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa, okay. But do you know what? If you've got the integrity, which clearly you do, and the kind of mindset, which clearly you do, in
Mm,
wanting to help people, because I think a lot of people that are doing that, it's for their own accolade. It's for the
it's for the money.
cash. And
Yeah,
it's so kind of disheartening to see because they're preying on vulnerable people, and you think
yeah.
sometimes, have you even had a drink problem? You're just saying you're sober, and you're kind of trying to cash in on it. So no, I love your Instagram page, and I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing because your whole kind of, for want of a better word, tagline is trying to get dad's sober, isn't it? So you're having the empath from where you've come from, and that's kind of the whole structure of yours, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So when I was working as a mindset coach for affiliate marketers, I kept, there was lots of other sober coaches that I was talking to, and
Hmm.
I was getting other dads in other groups, messaging me and talking and asking about my journey as I was going sober, and I kept saying to my wife about it, and then I thought, well, we did dry January, and then I said, I'm going to keep going. And my wife, she still has the odd drink, but
Hmm.
she doesn't hardly drink at all now. A bit like your partner,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
Jimmy. So, and that's completely fine. That's up to her. I'm never going to judge. So, yeah, I just thought, why not? Let's go for it. And then 3 months down the line, it really, really did change me. I think uh, in the book, one of my favorite sobriety books is William Porter's Alcohol Explained,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he says after, it's a brilliant book. Highly
yeah.
recommend that one.
Love it.
One of the things he says after 3 months, everything neutralizes. Your body is maintaining homeostasis quite normally then. And I just remember like the energy I got and the way I felt. It really leveled up, and obviously other other people in sobriety like yourself,
Hmm.
they say it just gets better and better. So
Yeah.
it's having all that to look forward to, Jimmy, as well. It's being excited about the future. And while I was drinking, I was never excited about anything. No way.
No, you know what? It's a depressant. That's it, plain and
Yeah.
simple. So the more you do it, the more depressed you get, and then it's that vicious cycle where, for me, essentially, like towards the end, because well, it wasn't even a hangover; it was withdrawal that I was going through. But I was because I was so depressed, I was taking antidepressants. They weren't working because they don't work with alcohol, and I was just
Mm.
in this perpetual state of misery, and the only thing and it, it would make me feel better, but only for that short period of time, and then we'd be back to kind of square one again, and it just keeps going round and round and round like that, and it's horrible. But as you and I know, this is where it's at. This is living. We live in a world now where we're all kind of wanting to explore different ideology and health benefits and spirituality and all of these different things. But if you're just dousing it all at the weekend with booze, it's like what is the point? I wanna have a better better mental health and better outlook on life. As I say, I'm stepfather to three young kids, so I want to be able to have fun with them and not sit, at the weekend and sit in bed and go, oh, I don't feel well. I don't want them to see that they'll never know a drunken Jimmy. I'm not even going to touch wood because I know I'm never going to drink again. You'd have to
Yeah, yeah,
you'd have to hold me down and pour, uh, you know, vodka down my neck for me to have another drink again, and it's just
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
never gonna happen. I know,
yeah,
and when I used to do like the fellowship, and it was like never say never and one day at a time, and yeah, but those
yeah,
days are
yeah, yeah,
gone now for me. I'm well beyond that. But I know that people are out there listening that are just kind of early days and they're just starting
yeah.
out. And like you said, for me, like coming up for 5 years, that seems so kind of unattainable at that point for them. So what would you
Mm.
kind of tell them, just coming up on 6 months, what advice would you give them? And as a sober coach as well.
I would say definitely don't ever wait for the perfect moment.
Hmm.
You've literally got to go and create it. I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, he's been sober curious for a while. He's got a problem, and he
Hmm.
knows it." And he was saying to me, "Yeah, but I've got Glastonbury coming up, Luke. I said, mate, I said, there's always gonna be something in there, you
Always,
know,
yeah.
uh, always." And I remember this January, I had a skiing trip. I had a day out at Twickenham with the lads, and I was like, I'm doing it. I said, I don't give a crap. I said, I'm doing it. I said, because there'll always be something. And I was saying to my friend, I was like, look, when Glastonbury's done, when that holiday to Turkey is done, I said, it's going to be Christmas, and that's going to be another excuse. So just get on with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that sounds a bit harsh, but that's the truth, and it really is.
No. And I
Uh,
think, and I
another,
think, a
yeah,
caveat to that as well. It's like if someone says to you, "Oh, I've got Glastonbury coming up," or it's Leeds Fest or whatever they call it now.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you've got that coming up. So why don't you take that advantage and
Mm.
use and
Yeah.
do that festival sober and see what it's like? And believe me, you're going to have a
Yeah.
better time. Once you go over that first couple of hours, maybe the first day of a whole festival weekend of anxiety and going, oh my God, where do I put my hands? How do I dance? That'll go, and then you can just start enjoying it, and you're going to remember the entire weekend. You're not going to end up with your head in the front porch of a tent with your legs sprawled out. Oh no, that was me. But yeah, that happens, you know.
Yeah, no, I just while you were just saying that, I thought when I got back from that skiing trip, I remember because my brother went with me and he was telling my sisters back in Bristol that I was sober, and I remember my sisters texting me saying, "We're so proud of you. I can't believe you've done it. Well done."
Yeah, yeah,
And that is it, Jimmy. You know, if you can go out to an event and prove to people that you can do it,
yeah,
then I remember my first few months of walking out of a pub, leaving when I wanted to leave, just walking home thinking I'm going to get a good night's sleep tonight. I'm going to wake up and now, like I talk about, I get goosebumps. Now
mhm,
I look forward. When I go to bed, I look forward to waking up because I know, because I
yeah,
love my mornings now. I've got my morning routine, all
yeah,
these things, and I just feel sorry for people who are still stuck in those cycles. But yeah, walking out of the pub and just that feeling of like I'm so like giving yourself a pat on the back almost.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a hell of a it's a hell of a feeling. And yeah, getting texts from my sisters was brilliant. I remember it
yeah.
was yeah, it's amazing.
It's when I suppose you sometimes expect people to go, "Oh my God, what are you doing getting sober?" But it's not that. They're like, they're so proud of us, you know. And if they're
Mm,
not, and if they don't have time for that, then, I'm sorry, I don't have time for you. Do you know what I mean? Because this is what I'm doing.
yeah.
This is my life. And I think the more we realize that, the more we realize that people, the anxiety that we have of going to a thing and not drinking and oh my God, what are people going to think of me and all that, it's all up here because actually they don't give
Mm,
two craps what you're drinking or what you're not drinking, unless they're your die-hard drinking buddy that they only can drink with you, which is very rare. At the end I was just a solo drinker. They don't care, and if they're your true
yeah.
friends, they're going to support you and go, yeah, good for you, and they might even, you know like a lot of our friends over here since I started the podcast, you know, a lot of them come up and go, oh, I don't drink that much anymore and all that, and that's fine, you get that. But actually, a lot of people since listening to the podcast have been saying, we're starting to get a bit sober curious, or we're not really
Mm,
drinking as much. We want to be healthier, and yeah, and it's just kind of putting the message out there, and I think the more people get to know about it, that actually life is better without it, it kind of opens doors for people. So yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's setting that example, isn't it? Proving to people that you can have fun without
yeah,
alcohol. While I was on
exactly.
that holiday, when I was on that ski holiday, one of my close friends was saying to me, he's like, why don't you drink? And I said to him, I said, why do you drink? And he said, because it makes everything better. And I was just like, oh my
Mm,
God, wow. But that's the mentality,
yeah,
and I was the same, Jimmy, I'm not here to judge. I was the
no,
same. But you hear things like that, and these people, they built up these beliefs in their subconscious mind over decades and decades and decades.
yeah,
And it's so sad to hear. And it's like if people like me and you can keep spreading the message and putting out the content that we put out,
yeah,
then I think more and more people are going to become sober curious, and hopefully in 10, 20 years time, society, will change, and it'll go the same
yeah.
way, like you were saying before, as tobacco has gone.
hmm And I think that's it. I think the youngsters coming through, I think they're all right, man. I'm not worried
Mm,
about them
yeah.
because they're really not that. I've said it before. They're not. They're more conscious about being videoed on someone's phone, being absolutely twatted and making a fool of
Yeah.
themselves. They don't want that. They don't want that spread around school or university or whatever. So they're very conscious of that. So I'm not too worried about them. But I think it's trying to get these old ravers back down to earth and say, you know what, that
Yeah.
ship, that spaceship has sailed, and you need to come back down off of it, because it's not cool anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was some right states on Friday night, and you just look at them and you think you're about 3 weekends away from a heart attack. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the thing. If you're still popping pills and doing all that, and I know this, my problem was mainly alcohol, but it leads to other stuff. And I just think the amount of cocaine that's still
It
being
does.
taken by people our age and older is mental, because
Yeah,
that shit will stop your heart in a heartbeat. So
exactly.
do you think alcohol
Yeah.
still has a place in our society, Luke?
So I've listened to many of your podcasts, so I knew
Oh,
this question
thanks,
was
man.
coming. I
Yeah,
knew this question was coming, Jimmy, and it's a tough one.
yeah,
Uh, having gone through, what me and you have been through, I think we can both agree that it doesn't have a place in our
yeah,
society anymore.
yeah,
However, there are some people out there who can still moderate, and
yeah.
I will never be able to get my head around it. But I can only really count those people on one hand.
Hmm.
So if if you were to take it out of society, would you be taking it away from them? Is that a good or bad thing to do? I I personally, obviously having seen what I've seen and having learned what I've learned about alcohol and all all the harm and all the chaos and in my own home as well. My parents' marriage broke down because of alcohol,
Mm,
and it's caused so many problems in my family. Uh, you know, I don't believe it does have a place
yeah,
in our society anymore. No, definitely not.
yeah,
I agree with you.
yeah. And that's the thing. There's no right or wrong answer, and
No.
it's just like, does it have a place, or if people have all of the educational and the research that you and I are doing and other people are doing. We're not
Mm.
obviously doing the research, but researching and finding out the stuff.
Yeah,
Because,
becoming
like I said
aware.
earlier, we had no idea. And I think the vast majority of people out there, people I speak to, friends, family, when I tell them this is 7 types of
Yeah.
cancers and all these different things.
Yeah.
If everybody knew that, if that was sent out by the
Yeah.
government as a big bulletin across the country and said, right, guys, we're telling you this now, this is fact, and
Yeah.
then make up their decision. And I know that
Yeah.
people wouldn't stop straight away. Of course they wouldn't. I smoked, and I knew the dangers of smoking back in the day when I was a smoker, but I didn't think
Yeah.
it was going to be until I was like, I'll quit before it becomes a danger to me. And thankfully,
Yeah.
hopefully, I have done. But it is one of those things. It's that, because people are so used to doing. Do you remember when mobile phones first came out, and then everyone's saying that people were going to
Just
get
about. Yeah.
brain tumors and all of that kind of thing? And it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
and I remember thinking, even if that turns out to be true, mobile phones had become so integrated by that point that it was like, how are you going to suddenly tell people to
Stop
stop
people.
using them?
That's a
Because
really
they're
good
like,
way of
we
thinking
rely
it.
on
Yeah.
them so heavily now that it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's one of those ones.
Yeah.
So
They've
do you regret getting sober,
they've
Luke?
do I have what a question. No, mate. Oh my God. Wow. No. No. Well, it's just all the time that I've got now. Sober coaches. We bang on about
Yeah,
time. So much, but it gives you so much time back.
yeah,
Uh, you know, Obviously there's all the health aspects of it. I've got a lot more money now as well.
yeah,
I mean, you know, why would I go back drinking
yeah.
now, knowing what I know and feeling the way I do? So do I regret going sober? Of course not. It's been one of the best decisions that I definitely made for me and my family. And I think the ripple effect it has, if you can set an example, be that role model for your kids, the ripple effect is going to be massive, isn't it? Going. I broke a cycle as well. I
Yeah.
think about the way my granddad drank, the way that my dad drank, and all that happened. If I can break that cycle and not pass it on to my kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
it's that ripple effect, Jimmy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. And then, so just when you're saying earlier that your boy asked you if you were an alcoholic,
Mm.
how has this affected your family, and what what's your kids kind of, now that I assume they know you don't drink, and is that kind of, have they mentioned that at all, or is it just kind of one of those things that daddy doesn't drink now?
No, they have mentioned it. They have questioned it.
Hmm.
My boy, he has tried drinking.
Hmm.
Uh, he plays rugby here on the Isle of Man,
Right.
so yeah, so yeah, d don't get me started.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
used to play rugby back in the day, so I understand it.
Massive drinking culture, isn't it? Yeah.
Massive drinking culture.
Yeah.
It's one of those, isn't he? But I used to box when I was younger as well. So he's got
Uh-huh.
into boxing at the moment, and yeah, there's no drink or drugs associated with boxing anyway.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, he's but he has said to me quite a few times, are you seriously never going to drink it again, Dad?
Yeah, yeah.
And but your kids, Jimmy, they won't do what you tell.
No.
I've learned it. But they won't do what they're told, that's for sure, especially when they get to teenage years. But
Yeah.
they'll do what you do. If you can lead by example and
Yeah.
be that role model and be that better person, just lead by example, stand
Yeah.
up and be the leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was growing up, I saw my dad drinking constantly, and I just thought
Mhm.
that was the norm. He normalized it, society normalized it, my friends normalized it, and I fell into that trap. And
Yeah.
I just don't want that for my kids. I want them to have a better life than I've had.
Yeah. And as I say, Jen's never been a big drinker. Kids haven't seen much, but I think, they were younger then, they're getting older. The eldest one's 14, he'll be 15 coming up. But they know I don't drink, they don't know the full extent of it. That's a story for, that's a conversation further down the line.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, they see that we go to events and, there's other kind of people drinking or whatnot, kids there, but they know that we're always, um, sober. Do you know what I mean? And we're the ones
Brilliant.
that we can drive home and all of that. I'm not, pointing fingers or saying anything about other parents and all that. But for for
Yeah.
for our lot, it's like they see our behaviors, and I'm happy with that because as you say, they're going to get older, they're going to experiment, they're going to do that. But at least if they've got all of the kind of knowledge about it, and
Mm,
we can still keep them safe, then that's all I can ask. But
yeah.
growing up, as I say, I didn't have all the facts, and I didn't have all the, and it was just a cool thing to do. So I know that they're going to have a drink, and they're gonna
Yeah. They're gonna
be egged on
experiment.
by their
Exactly.
friends. Peer
Yeah.
pressure is an absolute bitch. But as I say, I think, if you say to a kid, listen, alcohol causes 7 types of cancers, they
Yeah.
can Google that on their phone. And if
Exactly.
they find those sites, which pretty much will come up straight away now, they'll be like, oh, do you know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah.
because they,
Yeah.
they don't really smoke much. Single use vape is pretty bad, but I
Yeah.
think they're going
Yeah.
to outlaw that at some point soon anyway because it's an absolute scourge. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It is changing.
it
It
is
is
changing.
changing. And what you mentioned earlier as well, they did a test, didn't they, in Canada, in a small place in Canada with
Mhm.
and they put labels on alcohol. And
Ah,
yeah, and it did bring down alcohol consumption in that time because people were aware. I know you say about people need to be aware all the time, and
yeah,
if people were aware, then they wouldn't definitely wouldn't drink as much. And
yeah.
like you said, the younger generation, it is changing. It's definitely not like it was in the 90s. It's not
No,
glamorized anymore. And we've just got to keep banging the drum, Jimmy, haven't we?
keep banging the drum. And the Isle of Man, I think it's the only registered biosphere country in the world. And I want to take it to the MHKs and say, listen, why don't we start putting labels on the drinks just so people are
Oh,
educated?
brilliant.
No
Yeah.
one's saying stop them drinking, but as long as they've got the warnings on it, and we can do that, we can import the booze and then stick labels on this end. So, I mean, I want to start. I'm not started anything yet, but I want to just find the right MHK and start taking it to them and going, there's no harm in this. No, I don't want to be like this pariah on the island going, he's trying to take
Yeah.
away our booze. I'm not trying to do that.
Party pooper.
I'm
Yeah.
just wanting to
Mm.
put a label on it because drink responsibly puts all of the onus on us and not the manufacturers because they're like, if you can't drink responsibly, then that's not our problem anymore. We've asked you to, and if you can't do it, then too bad for you type thing. So yeah. Uh, Look, lastly, what I mean, you can have one or the other or both. What film or book about recovery would you recommend for the listeners?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, Jimmy. It would
Mm,
definitely have to be Alcohol Explained by William Porter. Have you
great
read
book.
it?
Yeah. It's an absolute brilliant
Yeah.
book. Yeah,
So I listen to podcasts and audiobooks all the time while I'm at
yeah,
work. I just constantly taking all this stuff in,
yeah.
and
No.
I listened to it on the audiobook, and it's the first book paperback that I bought.
Mm.
I listened to it and I said, "Wow, this is amazing. This is it," you know. So I bought the paperback and I've just given it to my wife to read.
Nice,
But
nice. It is a
yeah,
great book, isn't it?
yeah,
It's all the
it's
science
brilliant.
stuff, and he explains it so well for
Yeah,
non-science people like myself, and I just understood it, and I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense, and it just
yeah.
explained a lot about why I was drinking to excess and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot of light bulb moments in there, and one of the
absolutely.
biggest things for me was when I was drinking, I was always waking up in the middle of the night and I couldn't work it out. You know, I thought, well, if I drink a lot, I'll just pass out and it'll be fine. I'll sleep through the night. But he
Mm,
explains, 5 hours after your last drink, you wake up because of the anxiety and you're not getting enough REM sleep. And
mm,
since I've gone sober, my REM sleep, which I obviously record on my health watch, is
mm.
brilliant now.
Yeah,
So it's everything, Jimmy, and it affects everything in your life positive. And
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
can't stress it enough, and that's why I put content out there every day.
Yeah,
So
and it's
that's
great
it.
content. So where can people find you on Instagram and where your coaching is as well? So I'll put it all in the show notes in the description as well. But if you just tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok
Hmm.
under Luke Jones Coaching. Yeah, so come along. I've got plenty of content, like you said. I've got some free resources and bits and pieces on there. But yeah, um, like and follow the content, and yeah, drop me a DM. Brilliant.
Yeah. And I know the well, man, because once this goes out, people are going to be, they're going to be messaging you, going to be following you, and sharing your content as well because it's great content. And before this goes out, we are going to meet up and go for a coffee. And, as
Definitely,
the
yeah,
kids say,
yeah,
IRL, mate, IRL, we need to do that. So apologies again, we couldn't do it tonight. But once TT's gone and the island starts calming down again and we get the weather
yeah.
back. So, yeah. Is
Yeah,
there anything
yeah.
else you want to say to the listeners, mate, before we go?
No, just I'd like to thank you personally, actually, Jimmy. With my sobriety journey, your podcast has been absolutely brilliant,
Oh,
and absolutely love everything you do. And yeah, keep up the great work, mate.
oh,
Really
thank you,
appreciate it.
mate. No, I appreciate that. It's so lovely for you to say that. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, yeah. So thanks again for coming on, mate. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll catch up soon.
Cool. Thanks, Jimmy.
Cheers, look. Bye, bye, mate.
So yeah, thank you to Luke. An amazing story. For Luke, life started to really revolve around drinking in pubs. His wife was a drinker too, so it just became the norm for them, and really kind of just socially acceptable drinking. And then when COVID hit, it just became drinking culture, like it did for many people. And when the family went and got a hot tub, that just basically gave them a green light, an excuse to drink, and look glamorous whilst still kind of partaking in their semi grey area addiction. It's just really kind of reminiscent of a lot of people that I heard from around that time. Not obviously always with the hot tub, but just excuse after excuse. Oh, we're finishing work early, or we're not working, we're furloughed. Luke was working, but it he felt like he was out there working, so it was even more of an excuse because he felt he'd earned these drinks at the end of the day. So yeah, it's just fascinating how our brain kind of tells us these little stories to kind of make an exception for filling our bodies with a poison. Going back to what I was saying, I got my figures wrong, but in 2021, drugs attributed to 463,000 deaths, whereas alcohol was 1.81 million. So quite a vast increase there. That's all drugs put together. So from I guess, cannabis up to heroin, crack, and any illicit drug. But to see that alcohol is 1.81 million compared to 463,000 is just devastating. Tobacco attributes to 7.25 million, so massive. But alcohol's still second on that list, which is just crazy. So yeah, we talked about looking at healthier, better ways of living, and cutting out alcohol is the simplest and easiest way to do that. It really is. If you want to have a long and healthy life, yeah, eat better, exercise, and give up alcohol, or at least do it in a very, very controlled manner, because going out and getting shit-faced at least once a week is really not the kind of way to do it. Now, it's really interesting what Luke was saying about that Canadian study or test. So I found a link here. The Northern Territory's alcohol labels study was a scientific experiment in Canada on the effects of alcohol warning labels, AWLs. It was terminated after lobbying from the alcohol industry, surprise, surprise, and then later relaunched with industry-advocated experimental design changes, omitting the alcohol can cause cancer label, not labelling some alcohol products, and shortening the time period from 8 months to 4.5 months. Enough data was gathered to show that all the labels used in the study were simple, cheap, and effective, and it recommended that they should be required worldwide. I will put that link in the description. It's very interesting. If you start reading it, it's the big alcohol firms started kind of complaining because obviously they felt like it was going to be have a detrimental effect to their sales and their brand. Stop selling poison. So that's in the link as well. And I will put William Porter's link to Alcohol Explained in there as well. And thank you so much for listening again. Thank you to Luke. And hit the 5-star review. Pop a comment in your preferred platform if you can, or on Instagram. And just be great to hear some feedback. But thanks again to Luke, and have an amazing Monday, guys. See you next week. Stay safe, stay supportive, and stay sober.